Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2018 science fiction fantasy film, Mortal Engines. Now, Mortal Engines is one of those movies that was a colossal flop when it came out in 2018. It not only bombed in the box office, it also bombed with critics. It got absolutely scathing reviews, really low rating overall. There was a lot of people who hated this movie. Thought it was one of the worst films of the year, one of the worst films I've seen in a while. So as a result, I stayed away from this film. I avoided this film like the plague because of its reputation, despite the fact that I was curious about it. Because the trailer looked like it could be generic, could be a little bland, but it still looked like something that would be interesting. Because I like the idea. I love steampunk, futuristic landscapes, especially on film. And just the idea of a post-apocalyptic movie that deals with these roving cities who drive around and attack other cities and battle other cities for their resources is something that sounded genuinely intriguing to me. And then you throw in the steampunk aesthetic, which is something I've always been a fan of. And then you got something that's right up my alley, but I just didn't get around to watching it until recently. And I gotta be honest, I really liked this film. I know there were a lot of people who didn't care for this. I know there's a lot of people who still don't care for this. There's probably a lot of people who are probably watching this right now and thinking I'm nuts because I genuinely liked this movie. And that's fine. If you aren't a fan of this, that's totally fine with me. I have no issue with that whatsoever. It's definitely an acquired taste. But I thought it was entertaining. I thought it had some absolutely breathtaking and stunning visuals. I thought it had a great score. I thought Christian Rivers did a fantastic job directing the film, and I really do not understand the reviews that say his direction was flat, it was lifeless. I don't get that at all. I also don't understand all the claims that this was an insanely derivative film. Because I remember reading reviews that were from the time of this film's release that I checked back on after I saw the movie. Like, I checked in with them, and they were saying things like, it's derivative of Mad Max Fury Road and Star Wars and all these other movies. And I'm like, I never even thought of any of those films while I was watching Mortal Engines. While I was watching this film, never once did Mad Max Fury Road come to my mind. So I don't understand the claims that this is an insanely derivative film. I thought this was one of the more creative and ingenious and imaginative films in this genre that I've seen in a while. And also, the claims that it's too much like these other young adult films like the Hunger Games and the Divergent films or the Maze Runner movies are bullshit, because this is based on a book series that predated all of those fucking novels. So if you're going to try to say that this is too derivative of all these other young adult adaptations of books, you need to do your research. At least judge it fairly. I mean, come on. That's not asking too much for you to actually dig a little deeper and look back at the source material and see when it was published, and then base your opinion on whether or not it's derivative of those other works based on that knowledge. Because it's not derivative of other works that came out after it. That's just not fair. And that's just bad analysis. So as you can see, I'm a little heated. I'm gonna be the person who's gonna defend this movie. There aren't that many people, but I'll be one of them. Despite its flaws, it does have flaws. I'm not saying that it's a flawless masterpiece. I'm not saying that it's a great film. I think it's a really good movie for what it is, and I really enjoyed it. But it's not a great film, because it does have some problems with some of the cast, as well as the writing. The direction, though, by Christian Rivers, which I think was his directorial debut. I thought it was dynamic. I thought it was strong. I thought he had a real knack for dazzling visuals. I felt he shot action scenes in ways where they were really thrilling and exciting to watch. I do not get the criticism of his direction one bit. I don't get it. I don't understand why his direction was considered to be such a miss from all these critics. Because if you compare his direction in this to any of the other Marvel movies or any other films at the time, it's right up there with those films. And it's better than your average result that you would get from someone in a movie that has all these different big, grand visuals and set pieces. I really came away from the direction being dazzled. Like, there are some shots in this film that are absolutely gorgeous and stunning and breathtaking. So I think a big part of that is the direction, because Christian just lovingly showcased the best out of these scenes. And I think the direction is a real standout when it comes to this movie. I think it's a shame that he's considered to be not the best director, or people slammed his directing in this film, and it led to him not really getting a lot of stuff afterwards. Like, he's doing something called the Dam Busters, but because this movie was such a huge flop, and he was derided for his direction, he's probably not going to get another opportunity, and I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I thought his direction was really good. He did a great job. The script by Fran, Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Peter Jackson. This is a script that suffers from the same issue that a lot of these other adaptations suffer from. They cram in so many subplots and so many characters into one story that it's just not able to be as effective as it could be if it had more time, if it had more of an ability to stretch things out in a more natural way. This is the kind of thing that really would have benefited immensely from being a miniseries, being a Netflix series, being an animated show or an anime or something. Then you can really take your time with things. But as a feature film, you kind of have to, by design, cram things together. And as a result, you get a product that's a little janky. It's a little jumbled. It's a Frankenstein patchwork of these different elements from different parts of the source material. And that's why the writers and why Peter Jackson was very passionate about this project. It was a pet project of his. It was something that he did as a labor of love. I think he wound up like financing a majority of the production from his own pocket, because he really liked the novels, the Mortal Engines novels, and he really wanted to do a movie. And you can definitely feel that. There's a lot of passion and energy in the film. I don't get the claims that it was lifeless. I didn't get that impression at all from the movie. And the writing shares some of that same love, but it's also a double-edged sword, because some of that love leads to too many things going on, too many elements that are thrown in there. And it leads to certain elements that are stronger than others not being fleshed out enough, not being given enough runtime. And that's a detriment for sure. And it's a hard sell to begin with. This is such an outlandish, out there concept, but that's the kind of thing that I love about storytelling and I love about films. They showcase you a world that you can only see through cinema. Like, you're not going to see this world outside your front door. So I like the fact that it's very different from the norm, with these cities that are on wheels and they're giant and they're massive, or there's little cities that are like mining towns, or there are like these houses that drive around that are full of pirates and marauders. And I like a lot of things about this script, but there's other stuff that just, I mean, there's some politics here that are a little clunky. The stuff with East versus West. It does kind of have this whole sort of woke kind of thing. It's not super woke, but there are some woke elements that I think should have been turned down and didn't need to be turned up as much as they were. For instance, the badass Asian super chick, Anna Fang. I definitely feel that character really fell flat for me, and I think they could have done a lot more with that character. I think it didn't help either that the actress who played that character was fucking atrocious and wooden as hell. But I'll get to that later when I talk about the performances. But yeah, that stuff wasn't really handled the best. There's a whole subplot involving the daughter of Hugo Weaving's character, Thaddeus. So you have, Catherine, and she's going around with this guy named Bevis, who was, I guess, somewhat connected with Tom. Like, they were friends at one point, but then they had a falling out. But then he's more of a he's more of a friend of Catherine. Sorry if I have some moments where I kind of jumble things up, because there's just a lot of characters and a lot of stuff going on. So it's kind of hard to follow sometimes. And that whole subplot with Catherine and Bevis was unneeded and completely 100% unnecessary. And it padded the running time. It took away from stronger subplots that were more interesting, like stuff that involved Shrike. I really feel Shrike was wasted. I wanted to know more about the Stalkers. I wanted to know more about Shrike. I wanted to see more of Shrike, less of this bullshit, absolutely boring romance or adventure with Bevis and Catherine. Which, by the way, it literally does go nowhere. They discover something that characters could have discovered later on anyway. They don't get involved in the final fight, in the climactic battle. The daughter doesn't even do anything to stop her father. She just gives him a talking to, a little bit of a lecture. She basically does the equivalent of, I'm disappointed in you. And that's it. That whole subplot could have been cut out of the film, and you could have established the relationship between Tom and Hester more, have more scenes with Shrike, give more backstory and development on Anna Fang, give her more depth instead of just have her be this super badass chick of the universe, that kind of thing. She's just a badass, and that's all that her character is. I really think that they could have done a lot better when it comes to that, or have some more scenes that flesh out Hugo Weaving's character a little bit more and make you understand why he's doing what he's doing, that kind of stuff, instead of that whole just absolutely pointless bullshit with Catherine and Bevis. And I will say this, the stuff with Hester, there are some moments where the character the character gets a little grating at times, and I don't think the script did the best job making her actually be that heroic. Like, they try to do some stuff near the end, but I don't know, like, there's really not a lot of scenes that are that memorable of her, like, kicking ass. They seem to give all of that to the character of Anna Fang, and I don't get it. Like, you should have had more scenes of Hester being a badass and being a hero, because she's the one that's on the posters. She's the one that's the focus of things. And yes, I admit, there are aspects of the script that are just jumbled and kind of a mess. But when it gets to the action set pieces, they are exciting. There's a lot for the script to work with in terms of providing a lot of different moments where you can have tension, or you can have excitement or suspense. It's not the most unpredictable film, I will say that. But at this point in time, I mean, when it comes to stories, we've seen it all. And a lot of things are going to be predictable. To me, being predictable isn't a net negative in itself. especially if you're relatively entertaining and I'm still interested in the story and I'm still engaged with what's going on. And for the most part, I was engaged with things. I like the incorporation of other bits of technology from the past that are infused with the future. So you have the futuristic steampunk stuff, and then you have the other bits of old tech. I like that a lot. I think it had a nice sense of humor. There were some really funny bits in it, like when they're talking about ancient deities of the screen age, or the ancients, which is referring to our generation and referring to us, and it's a bunch of minions. I thought that was hilarious. So there were some genuinely nice bits of humor. I think the satire could have been written a bit better too. Like, it does have some nice bits of humor, but there are some moments where it's a little lame. And I do feel the romance between Tom and Hester just was not as strong as it could have been. It's a little flat. It's not completely flat. Like, I still buy that the two care for one another, but it's one of those things where it seems like they're more acquaintances. They're more friends than lovers. So I think they could have done a better job in terms of making the two more believably infatuated with one another. But despite my issues with the script, despite its Frankenstein nature, it's creative enough, it's inventive enough, and it's engaging enough that overall I think the script did a pretty good job, despite the fact that they had all these different writers and they were adapting things from multiple different novels, because this was intended to be a original creation, so to speak, that was inspired by the Mortal Engines novels. The writers and Peter Jackson knew that this was going to be a hard series to adapt, especially with just one movie, and to make it into something that could be decipherable and acceptable for a wide audience. So they made the conscious decision to make a film that was inspired by the world, but it told its own story. And I think that was a good idea. And I think for some fans of the novels, I think they were not a fan of that, and I can get it. I understand why, but by doing that, it makes it so they should not be strictly or harshly judged on the fact that they're not straight and really good adaptations of the source material, because they're not intended to be. It's not intended to be a faithful adaptation of the source material. It's intended to be a story that's inspired by the spirit of the novels and takes elements of them and creates a new story from those elements. So it's not intended to be something that's supposed to be a straight adaptation. And I don't think you can really do that effectively anyway when it comes to adapting a novel to film, because novel's a different medium than film. I never understood why fans of novels were so upset and pissed off that a movie adaptation wasn't exactly like the source material, because it's never going to be. Novels don't have a budget. Novels don't have to appeal to a wider audience. They can appeal to a select core group of people and get away with it. Novels don't have to pay actors. Novels don't have to deal with special effects. Novels don't have to deal with any of these things. So it's a completely different medium. They can also get away with having more dialogue, having more backstory, having all this stuff that a feature film just can't do because they don't have as much time. So there are certain limitations with a feature film adaptation of a novel that exist, and you have to take those into account. That being said, there are some adaptations that are bad because they just don't capture the spirit of the source material. And it's not because they're not faithful, it's because they don't really capture the spirit of it. Or they take elements from the source material and they don't adapt them in a way that feels respectful. And I didn't really feel that from what I have read when it comes to some synopsises or some bits and pieces of the novels that I've seen people share online. I didn't really feel that it didn't really capture the spirit of things. And in fact, it actually just made me more infatuated and more interested in this world, and I would like to read these novels someday. So it wasn't one of those things where it turned me off of the source material. It actually drew me closer to the source material. So overall, I thought the script was fine. Had some problems, was a little too overstuffed. Some elements, some subplots should have been cut out. Some things should have been built up more. But for the most part, it was a decent script. The cast, I'm very mixed on the cast when it comes to my feelings. Hera Hilmar, she's not bad, but she's not particularly great. She's just there for me as the lead. She lacks a certain extra bit of charisma or personality to really make this character shine. And also, maybe it's the way this character is written, or maybe it's the way that the actress portrays this character, but she came across as a little too young. And by young, I mean just like a little too inexperienced for someone who's been around the block for so many years. And I think a big part of that is just not having enough scenes of her finding her way out of the situation, of her being a badass and kicking ass and taking names and not having to be saved by all these other people, or having Anna do most of the work. It's a character, though, where I think is honestly the strongest when it comes to the scenes that involve her and Shrike, because that there is a more viable and palpable connection between the two compared to the connection between her and Tom, which felt very rushed and was something that they were just trying to throw in there and trying to build up as the film goes along. But it just felt like something where that could have worked if things were just handled better. And I didn't think she had the best chemistry with Robert Sheehan either, who played Tom. So that's definitely something that I'm mixed on. Robert Sheehan I liked him as Tom. He had a nice bit of charisma and energy to him. I don't agree with some people who say his performance is bad. I don't think it was that bad at all. He was one of the better performers in the film. Hugo Weaving was fantastic as always as the power mad Deputy Lloyd Mayor Thaddeus Valentine. He's as intimidating as ever, and it was a good performance. Definitely a good villain. Jihae as Anna Fang, she was fucking awful. Atrocious, terrible. Just one of the most wooden performances I've seen in a big budget film in a long, long time. It's one of those things where I don't really know why the hell this actress got this job. How did she get this? Did she know someone? Did they give her the job because she fit a certain look? Because this is one of those things where I just don't get it. Like, if you want like an Asian, like you could have Michelle Yeoh. You could have somebody who has a more serviceable track record, who you can buy being this badass character. I never bought it with this character. I never bought it with this performance. And that's the main reason why. The character didn't help either with the way the character was written, where the character just came across as overpowered and like this character was Superwoman. But then you get this performance and it's just so wooden and so bad that you don't buy it in any capacity. Like, why the hell would I buy that this woman who has the acting skills of a block of fucking wood is actually going to be some charismatic, engaging badass? It's just not, it's not a good fit. It's just a bad casting choice. Ronan Rafferty did nothing for me as Bevis. The character was nothing, so maybe it's not entirely his fault. Leila George, she was alright as Catherine, but then again, the character was not written that well. Stephen Lang, I thought, was spectacular as Shrike. I thought he did a really good job playing that character and showcasing a lot of emotion with a character that was essentially a machine. He was a machine. He was not human, but he still provided a lot of humanity and a lot of depth and a lot of strength into that character that felt very real and very genuine and very human. And it made the whole arc of that character very tragic and one of the strongest arcs in the entire film. And I basically just wanted to mention him because everyone else, I don't really need to mention. They're just there. But yeah, I'm mixed on the cast. It's got some really strong members, but then there's some other members that just are not really up to snuff. They're not really on the same level. The film features some absolutely gorgeous cinematography by Simon Raby. I mean, this film is absolutely amazing. Like, this is a masterwork when it comes to the visuals. Like, there are shots in this film that are just mesmerizing. And I just feel the cinematographer just nailed the whole look and the atmosphere and the vibe of the film. And there's just some shots in this movie that'll just make you go, wow. Like, oh my God. Like, it is that kind of film. The editing by Jono Woodford Robinson, I thought that was really well done. I thought the film had a lot of scenes that had a lot of things that were going on. A lot of different moving parts, literally. Like the machines and stuff that was just going crazy and going haywire, explosions, people flying around, and the editing, though, never really felt that chaotic and never really felt choppy to me. I felt it all flowed well. It definitely enhanced the action sequences, which were epic and exciting and thrilling and a lot of fun to watch. And even in the scenes that were just trying to showcase the film's visuals, I felt the editing did a good job in terms of really bringing out the brightest and best out of those scenes. The score by Tom Hulkenberg, oh my God, this score was terrific. This score is amazing. I definitely feel that this was one of his best scores. I think it's absolutely one of his best scores. I thought his score in this was really rousing, really strong, had a lot of different notes to it, a lot of variety. It was one of the more epic, one of the more memorable scores that I've heard in a while. And I definitely do highly recommend listening to this score just on its own because I thought it was that good. It just made the film even better when it comes to the action scenes, when it comes to the moments where it's trying to really immerse you in this world and in this landscape. So overall, the film even moved at a decent pace despite it being 128 minutes and despite there being some subplots that were not as interesting as others. I wasn't that bored by it. I never really had a lot of moments where I was completely disengaged. So yeah, Mortal Engines I thought was a enjoyable, imaginative, creative, fun film. I mean, yeah, things could have been better. Could have had a better lead. Could have made things stronger in certain areas, like I've mentioned throughout this video. But I didn't find it to be as derivative as people felt. I didn't find it to be as boring as other people felt it was. I didn't find it to be something that was just painfully generic and been there, done that like other people did. I thought it was fresh. I thought it was innovative. I thought it was something that dreams are made of. Legitimately. Like, this is the kind of stuff that you would see in your dreams if you're a creative person, or even if you're not a creative person. Sometimes people just have very vivid and very imaginative dreams, and it just felt like something that came from that realm, and it was just brought to life in detail and in ways that were just absolutely dazzling to watch. And got to give the visual effects artists a ton of credit. Even though there's a lot of CGI in this, it looks really good, and it's just a film that honestly I feel is pretty damn underrated. I don't get it. I don't get the hate for this. I don't get why people think that this is a disaster. It's terrible. It's one of the worst films of 2018 and one of the worst films they've seen in a while. I don't agree with that at all. I'll take this over most modern Marvel movies or comic book films or a lot of modern films today. In a lot of ways, to me, it's a shame that this didn't do better, because that just means we're going to see less films like this. Less films that take a risk and try to do a concept that's more out there than the norm. We're going to see less films like this, especially less major big budget studio films. The reason why this film is able to have visuals that are so breathtaking is because it had the budget behind it. If it didn't have the budget behind it, then it wouldn't be able to do as much as it ultimately does. So it's one of those things where it's a shame, it really is, that we're not going to see this kind of storytelling. We're not going to see these kind of visuals anymore for the most part, because this film did so poorly. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Mortal Engines, a film that I would recommend. I would recommend you checking it out. If you were at all curious about it, and it's a film you were on the fence about because of the reviews, check it out sometime. And if you have a 4K setup and you are able to find this for cheap, definitely check this out in 4K, because this film looks amazing in 4K, and also has a really good Dolby Atmos track. But anyway, thank you for watching my review of Mortal Engines, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.